Have you ever wondered why you're willing to pay a certain price for something? It's not always a fixed number, right? It can change based on this tiny, almost invisible piece of information. Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful psychological tool that's quietly shaping our decisions on everything from buying a coffee to choosing a hospital. It's called reference pricing.
I mean, really think about it. Why does seeing that 50% off sign give you such a rush? Is it just about the dollars and cents you're saving? Turns out, it's a lot deeper than that.
The secret sauce here is a concept called a reference price. This is the price that you, whether you know it or not, have stored in your mind as the right price for something. And once you understand how this works, you'll see exactly how companies and even governments influence what you buy.
Okay, so where does this magic number even come from? Well, it all boils down to how our brains create these little shortcuts to make decisions faster.
It all starts with a cognitive bias that psychologists call anchoring. Our brains just love to grab onto the very first piece of information we see. That first number becomes an anchor, and every other price is then judged against it. A $70 jacket feels like an amazing deal when it's anchored to an original price of $100, right? And listen, this is not some new marketing gimmick. This is foundational behavioral economics. The pioneers in this field, Tversky and Kahneman, proved way back in the 70s that we are just hardwired to look for these external cues to figure out what something is worth. That compare-at price, it's not just a suggestion, it's a seriously powerful psychological nudge. And this leads us to two kinds of reference prices. First, there's the internal one. This is the price that's already in your head. It's what you remember paying for a gallon of milk last week. Then you've got the external one. That's the price the store is showing you. You know, that crossed out list price. Both of them work together to frame your whole perception of what a good deal even is.
So, if this works so well for everyday shopping, what happens when you apply the exact same logic to something with way higher stakes, like, say, healthcare? It turns out this psychological trick isn't just for retail sales. It's become a major tool for controlling national medical costs.
In many parts of the world, especially across Europe, governments use something called International Reference Pricing, or IRP. What they do is look at a basket of drug prices from a bunch of other countries to decide the absolute maximum price they are willing to pay for a medicine. It's their way of anchoring their country's prices to an international standard. Now, in the US, a different model is a lot more common. Instead of the government setting the price, it's large employers who are doing it. This is called reference-based pricing, or RBP. The idea is basically the same. The employer sets a price cap for a medical service. If an employee decides to go to a provider that charges more than that cap, well, they're the ones paying the difference right out of their own pocket. So what happens when you actually introduce these price caps? Do people really change their behavior? Well, the data is pretty clear on this one. It completely redesigns the entire decision-making process. And this is where this term choice architecture becomes so important. By setting a reference price, these employers and governments aren't taking away your choice. They're redesigning the decision itself. All of a sudden, there's a really clear financial reason to shop around, making the consequences of your choice totally transparent. And wow, the results are dramatic. Just look at this data. After some large employers introduced reference pricing, the use of lower-priced facilities shot up for all these common procedures. And check out the effect on the average price paid. It dropped big time, by over 30% for lab tests. People actually started choosing the more affordable options. And you see a similar story playing out internationally. After Norway brought in a reference pricing system, the prices for both brand-name drugs and their generic counterparts fell pretty sharply. That anchor of the reference price basically pulled the entire market down with it. And all this price pressure, it creates real competition. That same study in Norway, it found brand-name drugs lost a full 15% of their market share. And why is that? Well, it's simple. When you're the one who has to pay the difference, that equally effective but way more affordable generic starts to look a whole lot more attractive. So, with all this evidence of cost savings, you'd think this would be a total no-brainer, right? But it's not that simple. And this is where we get to the heart of a really fierce debate. The central conflict really boils down to this. Are the cost savings we get today worth the potential risk to finding new cures tomorrow? It's this massive trade-off, and there are some really passionate arguments on both sides. On the one hand, the potential savings are just staggering. One study estimated that if you just expanded reference pricing to 8 common services for everyone with commercial insurance in the US, you could save almost $20 billion a year.
So the proponents argue that this is a proven tool for containing costs. They say it increases transparency, makes healthcare more affordable, and ultimately gives more people access to the medicines we already have by keeping them from becoming outrageously expensive.
But on the other side of the coin, critics, especially those in the biopharmaceutical industry, they warn that these savings come at a dangerously high cost. They argue that tying our prices to those in other, often lower-priced countries, will absolutely cripple the engine of medical innovation.
And the numbers they put forward are pretty stark. One analysis projects that if the U.S. implemented international reference pricing, it could lead to 61 fewer new medicines being developed by smaller biotech companies over the next decade. 61.
The economic hit could be pretty severe too. Projections show the potential loss of nearly 200,000 jobs directly in the biopharma industry, not to mention many more across the wider economy that supports it.
So, the logic here is basically a direct chain reaction. Lower prices mean lower revenues. Lower revenues mean less money for R&D. And that, they argue, leads to stifled innovation, delays in getting new drugs to market, and ultimately, fewer future cures for all of us. So, we are left with this incredibly difficult question. How do we balance the very real, very urgent need for affordable healthcare today with the equally important need to invest in the breakthrough treatments of tomorrow? The answer isn't simple, but it has to start with understanding the power of that hidden number, the reference price.